love for archaeology and Egyptology come from in the first place?
I like to say that all children go through either a dinosaur phase or an ancient Egypt phase, and with a small percentage, that interest stays with them for the rest of their life. And I was one of the Egypt kids, and also, my father used to take me around more Welsh castles than will last me a lifetime, and so I became interested in my teenage years in ancient Egypt, and it stayed with me for the rest of my life. Although I've actually, as an archaeologist, I've worked in many kinds of sites, from Viking sites, Roman sites. My PhD was on Australian Aboriginal sites. And then latterly, I've been interested in Egyptian temples, and now, as I say, in late Roman buildings and that kind of thing. And I like to think that the kind of skills that I learned from my degrees in archaeology make me something of a world archaeologist. You can take that toolkit and apply it to something completely different, the way of thinking and looking at the minimum amount of information that you have, and making an explanation that makes sense to the widest number of people, and not just specialists. I think the key for me is how to absorb the archaeology and make that accessible to somebody with an interest in ancient Egypt, for example. What does the latest information coming out of Egypt tell us about how people lived in those times? Without going into a lot of technical detail and jargon.
It's such a niche area, I suppose, archaeology. Yeah. Is it very well connected across the world? Do you know people working on similar projects all across the world?
Yes, I do, and that's one of the joys of having been a commissioning editor. Even in my role as director at AUC Press, I was commissioning in Egyptian archaeology and Egyptology, and that's given me a connection across the world. I have a couple of Facebook pages, and I do Instagram and Twitter and those kinds of things, and I have about 10,000 people on those pages, and we're all sort of, it's like a small family. There are probably 2,000 professional Egyptologists in the world, but there are tens of thousands of interested amateurs, and I try and connect with them, and also try and bring them along with other things that I'm doing that I'm interested in, including, as I say, this kind of early medieval stuff, which is completely alien to a lot of people whose interests lie in the thousands of years of Egyptian history.
How did you find the writing process of your book?
Quite hard. I think the research phase is always the hardest part, and trying to make sure that what you've done is accurate. And I have to say that I'm a terrible writer. I spend time on every sentence. I know I'm not the only one that does this, but I write a sentence, and then I'll go for a little walk around the office, around my study here, and then I'll come back and write another sentence. So it takes a bit of time to do. I'm a perfectionist in that regard, and then I'll look at it and I think, I've lost all skills in punctuation. I'll have to go back and have a look at that and this kind of thing. So it takes me forever. But the trick is, to keep plugging on and to know when to stop. And when you think you've got it and you've checked it and you've had somebody else read it, that's a great feeling. I also do my own photographs, so that's another component of the work. Spending time in somewhere like Abu Simbel and taking photographs there to be part of the publication. So it's a long process, but it's an enjoyable one.
Did you ever consider teaching archaeology?
I think in the early days I did. I graduated in. I finished my PhD in '86, and at that time there were quite severe budget restrictions on the academic sector, and it sounds a bit trite, but I love books, and it seemed to me at the time that was the route that I should take. Is try and communicate my passion for books, not knowing, I suppose, at the time that I would end up writing them, and that was a huge step in terms of the difference between commissioning books and being a publisher, and actually taking the plunge and becoming an author myself. And again, this is something I'll never regret. I think I wasn't sure I had a book in me. And then I eventually published the Abu Simbel book, and it's a great feeling to see that, and you begin to understand from the other side of publishing what a great feeling it is to have a book with your name on and say, "Oh yeah, that's mine."
Mm-hmm. Have one book you'd recommend to a budding Egyptologist?
Actually, I think so. I think that's a very good question. I think I would suggest, it depends what age they were, but I think a book like Nicholas Reeves's new book, The Complete Tutankhamun, is a great place to see some of the glories of ancient Egypt. There are quite a few good short histories of ancient Egypt, but I would say essentially go to your local library and look along the shelves, and you'll see something that I think will pique people's interest. Or go to the British Museum. It doesn't have to be a book. Go to the British Museum, look at the Egyptian Gallery, which is a collection that's been made over, in Egyptian terms, over 150, 160, 170 years, something like that. There are lots of ways, I think, to enjoy ancient Egypt. Even in our little library here in Canterbury, there's a little collection of things that Victorian travellers brought back, and they're fascinating to look at. Often misused, but they're fascinating to look at.